Welcome to another episode of the Black Male Impact. Today we have as guest Dr. Cary Holman. And before we get into the conversation, I just want to give you a little about Dr. Holman, which he will go back and give you a backstory of who he is before we get into the conversation. Dr. Holman, welcome to the Black Male Impact.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Cross.
Yes, sir. So Dr. Holman is a middle school principal, motivational speaker, education advocate, professional development presenter, and he's also Mr. Opportunity. Dr. Holman, go ahead and please share about yourself before we get into the conversation.
All right, so good afternoon. Greetings to everyone that has tuned in to the Black Male Impact. I am Cary Holman. I'm currently a middle school principal. I have now been in education for the last 27 years, working with either middle school or elementary school. And so with that, I matriculated through my educational experience by starting off at a junior college. I received my associate's degree and then went on to get my undergraduate degree, and then my master's, and then my EDS, and then pursued my doctoral degree and finished all of those. In addition to, education, I am a dad of two boys, married for 21 years. Both my wife and I serve in ministry at our local church. And through my work as an educator, I just firmly believe, as you so introduced, Dr. Cross, also known as Mr. Opportunity. That is my punchline, because I position everything from the angle of there are no such things as problems. I view them as all opportunities. And so my work in education has stemmed through everything from teaching first grade all the way through collegiate level. In addition to that, after teaching first grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, I also taught junior college, and then also at the local university through the undergraduate program as well as the graduate program. Then been a middle school middle school principal now for the last 16 years. Also served as an elementary principal for 2 years, worked with the central office, 1 year with at-risk programs in the middle school. And so my experience has gone from everything from first grade all the way to collegiate level with my work. As far as presenting, I go around the United States at different conferences and present on school culture and climate. I present on having the right prescription, because having served in education as long as I have, it's one of those things that you see things that come and go, and then you capitalize on those things that you deal with each and every day.
Man, that's awesome. Over 20 years, that shows dedication. That shows you're committed to molding the young minds for the future. And that's worth an applause to be serving in that space so long, especially when we hear there is a need for Black men to be in education. So, man, that is great that you have been serving for so long in that space, because it's a space in the education system. More of us, more Black men are needed to be there in the classroom, not just because of their knowledge, but because to help change the narrative or the perspective, not only for the Black students, but for all students, as the research have proven that Black men really make a tremendous impact in the education system. So, man, I really applaud you for the work that you're doing and your commitment to molding the next generation, and being that you are there when they are much younger. That's really awesome, because it's needed in our community. So, Dr. Holman, I'm going to get into the questions.
Okay.
And just because the goal for this conversation is to inspire positive change. You are doing it. We just want the world to learn from you. what others can do, what you're applying to help others to make an impact, because it's always great to have an insight or a new perspective in how we go about making a positive difference.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So my first question to you is, what is the mindset that it takes to make a positive impact?
And that's a great question, Dr. Cross. When I think about the actual question, what is the mindset? The mindset has to be one that is very focused and one that is very intentional, particularly when you're working with children, those of color, or even young men. When you think about the needs of individual children, a person who really wants to have an impact has to understand that every individual is different, thus requiring a different prescription or medication, and so levels of support that they're going to need in their lives. So I would most definitely say that an individual, that the mindset has to be one that is focused and one that is intentional, because when you are focused and when you are intentional, then you recognize the impact that you have is long lasting and life changing.
Man, that's awesome. Long lasting and life changing. And
Absolutely.
I think going into the education space, and I think you have to go with that mindset to have a lasting impact or a life changing impact on the students. And I like what you said. Don't go into any space once you're dealing with people with this is what's for every student or every individual is different. And so I really like that perspective when approaching, especially in the classroom where you're serving others, because one formula may not work for everybody. So you have to be open to share or even learn different ways of serving. And I know you mentioned middle school and high school and collegiate level education. What's the difference between both, or the different K through 12 and collegiate from your experience?
Yes. So when you think about the scope in which I have worked, both from the elementary to the collegiate level, the probably the only difference in speaking with individuals is that of a maturity level. Children that are in elementary school are going to understand things at a very simplistic approach. Whereas once we matriculate on to high school and collegiate level, then because of life's experiences that those individuals have had, the conversation can then go a step further in the depth that you want to cover with individuals. It's as though I would use, for an example, that of going to the beach or going to spend some time there. That at an elementary level, you more or less would spend more time at the shoreline, really getting individuals acclimated to the environment in which they are about to embrace.
Okay.
However, when you get to more of a college or high school level, you can then spend a little bit more time going on into the water, because they can handle more depth conversations that you might have with individuals. And that's why I go back to the term intentionality as well as focus on everything that we talk about. Because when you're working with children and when you're working with people, we as leaders, we as individuals who want to have an impact, have got to be very open to individuals having their differences and respecting their differences. Because once we can respect their differences, then it will then lead us to how we need to communicate with them to lead to deeper discussion.
I really appreciate that. We do have to, when serving, have to respect the differences or the difference in each person that we are serving. So that perspective is really it's a great reminder, I should say.
Yes.
And because once you serve in men, you have to take that in consideration when you are dealing with people, old people or young people, from children to adults. That's important. But I really like the mindset that it takes to make a positive impact. You have to be focused and you have to be intentional. That's a great reminder for all of us and the listeners. So my next question is, what advice do you have for the men listening on how they can play a role in creating positive change?
Absolutely. The very first thing that I would share to our viewing audience is to understand this statement here, that it's not about me, it just involves me.
Hmm.
That we must understand that if we're going to have an impact, our impact is not going to always come through words, but our impact is also going to come through our ability to listen. What I often tell teachers, administrators, when I go and speak at conferences, is that we must learn how to talk with individuals rather than talking at individuals. And so when we understand that our impact goes beyond words, they go beyond actions, we as individuals have the interpower to really be a light set on a hill, to offer great guidance for individuals that are progressing through as we did. If we understand that this notion in life, that our what has happened to me in life does not have to define me, it more or less gives me guidance as to where I can continue to move.
I would want you to repeat that first line. It's not about me. What did you say again?
It's not about me, it just involves me.
And so you have shared some really good nuggets in that what you just shared from that point until the end of what you said. I don't remember everything that you said, but I really I know you talk about listening, which is really important that we have to listen to individuals. But I really like that phrase. It's not about me. It just involves me. And
Mhm.
sometimes when we take ourselves out of what we're doing and don't make it so focused on ourselves, we can make a greater impact because then we take the people who we are serving in consideration, more so what I'm getting out of this situation. And I really, and when it comes to serving, it's important that we understand that part of service. Don't make it so much about ourselves, but the people that we're serving and be able to listen. So, not just our actions, but the things, just being able to listen to individuals because we can take action, but are we listening to those we are serving? And as men, at times, we are really action oriented. And so, getting that perspective, I believe it's important when it comes to making a positive impact. Anything else that you want to share on that piece?
Yeah, I will speak in Dr. Cross in regards to particularly when you think about. I'm going back to your word, and it's such a powerful word on this whole notion of impact, and that as we are working with young men, or we're working with children, or we're just working with people, if we understand that while we are talking with an individual, we are planting seeds. Here's how we know impact has been made when it becomes life changing. Because what we tend to know, and we think about this, think about the lessons that our parents shared with us, think about the lessons that our teachers shared with us. But it's one of those things don't become learned until you actually do them. I can tell you all day long how to cook a meal, but until you go cook the actual meal, it doesn't become learned. And so impact is just like a prepared meal. Impact in so much that yes, I'm going to share with you. Yes, I'm going to sow this seed, to plant a seed, but the impact comes through experiences that I can remember those conversations that individuals had with me. I think about children that come back to my office years after they graduate, and they sit and we talk, and they will say things such as, Dr. Holman, You also often used to tell us that life will happen, and absolutely life will happen. And what we know about impact is this: when children see that you are invested in their well being, or when individuals see that you are invested in their well being, they will most definitely then convey that and learn from it.
That's a really powerful. And you're talking about individuals learned what you share with them through the actions they take or just doing it. I do believe that's how we know, as you shared, if they're learning or not. And just by you sharing that, the thought that was going through my mind is, as men, we sometimes, when we know we want to make that impact, we have to be willing to do the same work over and over because we want whoever we are trying to impact to really get it. Because sometimes it takes more than one try or one go at it or one time we're sharing it to make it register where we want to see change and a positive impact taking place. So that's just a thought that was going through my mind when you share that we want to make sure they're learning, or we can know if the impact is being made by what the person do afterward. So sometimes we just have to be willing to do the work over and over and over so we can see that impact. That's just a thought that was going through my mind once you were sharing. But I'm going to go into the next question. How can we as Black men help to change the narrative today?
Yes. When we think about changing the narrative, I go back to this example that when you think about for a moment the things that we experience as Black men, and we think about how we continue to persevere, the way that we change the narrative is that we cannot allow someone else to tell our narrative. That we have got to be in a position to be willing to clearly articulate where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. We have to be, I do believe that there's a sense of vulnerability there that we have to be open to share, because a lot of times we as Black men will hover things deep down on the inside and will not share, but yet will be very quick maybe to complain. But if we, in order to change the narrative, I do believe that attention has to be given to some vulnerability, to be open to share with another individual that just those things, those of us who have been through can tell those going through how to get through.
Hmm.
And so that's the approach that I would most definitely say we could take.
Okay, but is there a particular narrative? I know you said we need to take a hold of our own narrative. We need to be the one sharing it. We need to have some vulnerability. I know there are different spaces that we may need to take a hold of. But say in the classroom, being that a lot of Black men are not in the classroom, there are violence in our community and stuff like that. So, as you said, those who have gone through need to help those who are going through and how they can go through the challenges. So, is there, like, say, in our communities now, the young men may not have mentors? How would you encourage a young man who is listening, not knowing how to get a mentor, to approach someone to be their mentors?
Yeah. You know, when I think about mentoring young men, and it's funny that you say this because I made this announcement today in church because we have a mentoring program that we are encouraging. The key to really helping individuals become powerful individuals. I'm going to go back to a statement that I said earlier, and that is we've got to be very slow to identify or label young men and really take the time to listen to their story.
Hmm.
I believe this, and I've seen it in my 27 years of education, the more and more that I sit and listen to children speak and allow them to share their frustrations. And we've got to be okay with allowing a person to really speak from the heart. And when they're talking with us, that we cannot be quick to pass judgment, but rather be still to hear them talk about what is not being said as well as what is being said. And so, with that notion, I do believe that there has to come a time that we individuals who are desiring to be mentors understand that the message is still the same, but the method has got to change.
Hmm.
That the way that we were taught things is totally different now than how we can now get to individuals, because children now, particularly young men, have a wall that they have built up. Why? Because of letdown, because of false hope, because of individuals who have said they were going to be there and then not be there. And so, because of that, we've got to chisel at the mortar on their walls to help tear the walls that they have built up, for them to see that there is an individual on the other side who is caring and who is invested in what he desires to be in life.
I'm glad you shared that because, of course, that's some of the challenges. And with myself in the collegiate level or in college, higher education, I've seen males present themselves like that, where they would need the help, but they are still reluctant because of what you just shared. They may have been let down. And when you get deep into the understanding of why they react or act the way they do, they share it from that perspective where no one really cared about them. They don't have anyone to really go to and talk to about their challenges. So that's a valid point and great point, especially when we're talking about mentorship or talking about changing the narrative, because it's not about us. To go back to what you said, we have overcome most of the challenges to be where we are. So our responsibility now is to help those who may not have the hope or have the belief in themselves. So that part takes for us to be a good listener and someone who understands that the generation now, being that the focus can be to mold the next generation through how we live and to break those barriers. But sometimes, as you shared, we have to help them to break the barrier that they put up because of how many times they have been let down by people close to them or just society on a whole. So that's a perspective that is worth remembering when we're talking about changing the narrative or just being that change for others as we go forward. So my next question is, what or who has influenced or inspired you to pursue the path that you're on? Being that you are in education.
Absolutely. There, I can begin to sit and think about a many of individuals who became a part of the village that has gotten me to continue to pursue where I am. But I most definitely always go back to my fourth grade teacher, and she still serves as a mentor of mine right to this day. Uh, in addition to her, without a shadow of a doubt, being raised in a single parented home with 7 children, my mom is and will continue to be one of my biggest heroes. And then it's interesting because mom has always been there. Then the teacher came, and then my wife came. So it's individuals that come in different chapters of our stories that help write the next chapter of the story. So I would most definitely give attention to those 3 individuals. In addition to, I would most definitely say the church family that through my years as a young man, growing up in church my entire life, and just having those individuals to speak a word, and then those words then marinate deep down on the inside. I often say now that it's important to make deposits because you never know when you're going to need a withdrawal.
That's right.
And so I really bank on those different deposits that have been made. And those are the individuals that have helped catapult me through this journey, through these years.
And as you go back to your fourth grade teacher, that being that you're in education right now, but you said a valid point or share a valid point where the individuals that we meet at different points on our journey really play a role. And we as individuals have to be open to receiving,
Mhm.
what deposit or what these individuals are there to help us to achieve within ourselves and to become stronger on our journey. But with the in the fourth grade and you still have her as a mentor, what would you share with a upcoming new educator or someone who wants to go into education? What advice would you share with them in regards to something that they need to look forward to?
Absolutely. And I share this all the time with my teachers. I guess you can see the smile on my face because I can talk about education all day long. I'm just passionate about it, particularly those that are coming into the field. The way that education has been viewed from the country, from the state level to the local level, it is very easy for an individual to miss the most important thing about education, and that is understanding that each child that we work with every single day has a name.
Hmm.
They're more than a number, they're more than a situation, they're more than a zip code, they're more than a neighborhood. They have a name. And as new teachers coming into the profession, if they would grab hold and understand the power that we as leaders, as mentors have in helping to mold the lives of individuals, we can see the return to be great. But it takes an individual who is willing to go beyond. This is an analogy that I use all the time. It takes an individual going beyond raking leaves to moving and digging root. That a lot of times it's easy to skirt along and just commend children each day, and that's raking leaves. But to dig root, it's when you pause and take a moment to sit and listen and have an honest conversation with children, because here's what they're going to remember. They're going to remember the conversations. They're going to remember their experiences. In my 27 years, I have never had a child come back to me and say, Dr. Holman, do you remember that test that you gave? Do you remember that my score that I made on this test? Absolutely not. But what they are going to remember are those moments that we had as individuals, learning together, talking together, and getting to know each other. That's impact.
They remember how you make them feel. Nothing about the test score, as you said. That's really powerful because that's how we create change. And that's how we build and mold the next generation to realize they too have something of value to offer. And I can just imagine for you to have your fourth grade teacher as mentor until this point, that speaks volume in itself. But that shows that experience then until now have really impacted you, which in turn have you to treat the individuals that you encounter with the same level of respect and care, which I believe is important,
Mhm.
especially when we are entrusted to serve. We have to take in consideration how we are treating others. Because, man, I can just tell you that for you to really have that level of respect and love for your fourth grade teacher up until this point, man, that shows the impact the teacher had on you then and now. So that's great. But what that shows is, the level of care when dealing with individuals. So my next question is, what is your perspective on the current climate of Black men in society today?
When I think about your question, Dr. Cross, I truly think about two things. The perspective that I have is one, Black men, particularly, have got to recognize, we've got to recognize our identity. And then, secondly, we've got to recognize our belief. Because so often, whether it be television, whether it be news reports, whether it be song, whether it be movies, narratives are told from many different angles. And those narratives are told based on someone's experience. But as a Black man, if we really look and take the time to recognize who we are as an individual, who we are and the impact that we have, and then really walk in that belief, I wholeheartedly believe in the power of an internal drive to want more. But in order to want more, you've got to see more. And in order to see more, you got to walk in more. And that comes from a belief standpoint that, yeah, I can watch the news all day long, but just because it's portrayed a certain way doesn't mean that has to be me. And that's what we as men have got to get that message across, that all of us, I want you to think about this, and to all of our viewers that are listening, all of us have a story.
Yeah.
All of us are a book. Some of us have short stories. Some of us have novels. And some of us have chronicles. Some of us have 3 and 4 chapters. And some of us have 20 to 25 chapters. What happens about our story is there are people who are not taking the time to finish our story. They're walking out on chapters because they can't handle all the content that we have to offer.
Man, that is profound, and I like the analogy in that we all have a story, and some people walk out on different chapters of our story because yes, our experiences are different, and our upbringing it's different. So how we respond to life will be different. But you said something that is really powerful, and that is for us to understand our identity. So it doesn't matter the narrative, it doesn't matter the labels or the stereotypes. We don't have to be limited by those labels or those stereotypes. Yes, our experiences are different, but once we tap into who we are, we become unstoppable. We have to realize that we are powerful beyond measure, regardless of what society says. And sometimes some of us don't really get the opportunity in sense where, as you mentioned, people may walk out on part of our story, but we now have to develop that internal drive, as you said. Despite whoever walk out, that's not who we are. We have to sometimes push ourselves to realize, what's in us. And we're not going to have people every step of the journey to believe in us. And that's why it's important we believe in ourselves. And as you said, there are different parts to our lives. Different experiences may present us with unfavorable experiences where we may not like. But that doesn't mean, and I'm just trying to take that parts of what you said, and don't limit ourselves based on our experience or based on what we have seen, how we are portrayed, especially in the media. We are more than the labels. We are more than the stereotypes. So it's just for us to understand that and tap into that greatness and live out that greatness. Some individuals sometimes would say, if we should understand our power, we could take hold of this whole narrative and become as great as we are capable of becoming, because we are innately, we have the ability to do great things. Sometimes we are distracted with the narrative that we have been conditioned to think about our self. But I think that piece that you shared with identity is really important. And I think that's something that we have to spend some time working on, because the ability is in us. We just have to get back to that point where we believe that we are capable of doing great things.
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate that perspective. But my next question to you, what change do you want to see in general and amongst Black men? I know you may have shared some part of that in
Yeah.
whatever you shared, but what change do you want to see in general, but especially amongst Black men?
The biggest change, and I'll go back to the statement that I just said in regards to identity and belief. The change being that we take a stand and we stand for what we know that we have the power to do. That standing comes in confidence. That standing comes in being vulnerable. That stance comes in being open to do like you and I are doing today, and that's sharing with one another. I truly believe the more and more that we share our experiences and our stories, the narrative can continue to shift. I think about my boys, and my wife and I, we brought our nephew into our home and raised him, and he is now in college. And so when I think about all three of them, I teach them, I model for them that as a Black man, that there are many things that that's going to come your way. But what I teach them most is knowing who they are and whose they are as a young man. That when you are called out your name, and I teach this to children at school every day when I walk my halls, that when you're called out your name, you don't always have to respond, because that's not who you are. If you call me by Cary, then I reserve the right to respond. But if you speak of anything other than Cary, I don't have to respond. But that is something that has to be taught to individuals to understand, how do I stand in the midst of adversity? How do I stand in the midst of things not going my way? You have to be rooted in order to stand. You can be bent, but you don't have to break. You can be swayed, but you're still yet, if you have good solid foundation, then that's what I would hope to see. The change of Black men is taking a stance. But in order to take a stance, we got to go back to those two things. We got to know who we are, and we got to know in what we believe.
That's the truth right there. And that's a great reminder. Know ourselves and know what we believe, and believing in ourselves at the same time. But knowing who we are is really important. And I really like what you're doing, especially with your sons, of course, but with the students that you serve, that when someone call them outside of their name, they don't have to answer, because that's not who they are. And once they develop that mindset, because they're going to go out in the world where they're going to be a lot of labels, especially with social media today. And that will help them to have that foundation that they don't have to live according to
Mhm.
those labels or what they're hearing about who they are, which is not who they are. So that, as you said, it's something that needs to be taught. And once the young generation or the next generation, even adults today, sometimes need to be reminded that if we don't make sure we are not modeling or acting in that negative way, things are not going to change if we do it, because the next generation are looking to us to be the example. So we have to make sure we are teaching what we want to see change, our model, what we want to see change in our society. And I believe that's something that worth remembering when we're talking about making an impact. or being the change that we want to see. So my next question, and I know you mentioned your fourth grade teacher when it comes to you on the path that you're on. But this question may be similar or it could be different. But what was a pivotal moment in your life?
And I thought about that question, and I really go back to this, as I often would tell teachers or when I go out and speak, that I want to give examples of things that I know that I know that I know. And so I made mention earlier that we have to be vulnerable if we're going to ever have an impact. And so this question leads me to being vulnerable. And I believe that one of the times in my life that was pivotal to me was when I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was so determined to go to college. Being from a single parented home, my father was not around, and most of my uncles and aunts, they were all military. My older brother and sister, they chose to take a military path. So I was the first to choose the college path. And so what was pivotal for me was when I recognized that I could not expect anything from my father because he was not in my life. But I was not going to allow that to deter my life's goals. And so when I recognized that I'm determined, I had a self drive on the inside. Once I realized my drive, that was my pivotal moment because I knew that what was going to become of me would be because of me, because I was determined to do that. Because I couldn't hold to this notion of, well, he hasn't been there and he's not going to provide these things for me. I had to move past that. And once I moved past that, without a shadow of a doubt, I knew from that day forward that I was going to be fine.
That internal drive will let you do things that some people will even doubt that you're capable because people are going to look at what's happening around you to determine. But when that internal drive kick in, man, it doesn't matter what walls are there. It doesn't matter what resources are not available. That internal drive will give you what you need to break down the wall or go around it, but it will help you to find a way. But I know you said your older siblings went to the military, and you went to college because you were determined that you were going to go to college. Because if you go to college, everything will be okay. But did you have like a college visit or an example where you say, you know what, college is what I'm going to do?
It's funny that you asked that question. I did not have a college visit, but I go back to that fourth grade teacher. I knew that in order to become a teacher, that I knew that I had to go to college.
Hmm.
And so I set my mind on nothing but teaching. And so because of that, I knew that I had to go to college. And even through my college experience, and I share this all the time, all through my years, through my 5 different degrees, I literally have, in my early years, took 16 and 18 credit hours every semester and worked a 40-hour week job all of my college years.
Wow.
And it's one of those people say, "Oh, you can't do that." Don't tell me what I can't do, because I knew that mom could only do so much. So I had to quickly recognize how focused, once again, focused and intentional that I was going to be. And I kid you not, through all of that, I literally took those many hours every semester and always worked a 40-hour week job.
That's commendable. And I tell these students today, man, they don't understand because they'll be doing 12 credits and be complaining, not working. And I shared that story with the students that I had 2 jobs and I was an athlete. And I was an RA. So it's crazy. But when you are determined, when you are focused, when you are intentional, you can get it done.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not easy, and everybody is not built the same way. But I believe if you make up your mind, you can develop some things in yourself that you don't even know you have. But you have
Yeah.
to make up your mind that what I'm going to do this. And as men, at times we may not do or have done something, but that doesn't mean we cannot do it. And but we have to make up our minds that we're going to do this and commit to it. And as they often start saying of lately, we have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable if we're going to become our best self. Again, becoming our best self will help us to be able to serve better. And when we are serving better, we in turn have a more fulfilled life, if I should say. But I like what you said about that, just the internal drive. And because it always goes back to that, you wanting more, you wanting to make a difference, you wanting to become your best self. And when you have that desire, setbacks or disappointments will not really stop you. It may slow you down, but if you're determined enough, you will get past those adversities and to realize what is possible for you.
Yeah.
My next question is, what life lesson have you learned late in life that you believe is important and can benefit this current generation?
Absolutely. I think about this statement, and though it may sound simplistic, it means a whole lot. Here's what I've learned. I've learned to live and not just be alive.
Hmm.
And if we as individuals would learn to live and not just be alive, not here just to take up space, but live the way that the Lord would have us to live in a way that we are being of help to one another, live in such a way that we want to internalize professional growth and development for ourselves, because I can't wait for things to be handed. Rather, I want to make things. I've just learned there's power in living than just being alive. I'll say it from that angle.
Okay. So, for the listeners that say, man, how do you live?
Yeah.
How would you? I know you said you live where you serve others and stuff like that, but the
Yeah.
individuals who are listening
Yeah.
and don't know, how would they learn to live? How would you address that?
So I would address it from this perspective. Yesterday is gone. Tomorrow is not promised.
Yes.
So all you have is today.
Yeah.
So I've learned to live in my today, meaning all I have is right now.
Yes.
I don't have 8 o'clock tonight. What I currently have is right now. And so, in order to live, if we would understand that what happened to me yesterday or what I did yesterday, I cannot go back and change. What I plan for tomorrow, I might be able to do if the good Lord decides to awaken me. But since I have today, then my focus has to be today. Now, in order to live, then an individual, I would say to our viewers, I would challenge a person to think on this wave. Don't let someone's opinion of you become the reality of you. That when we think about who we are as an individual, I reserve the right, you reserve the right to be happy. Happy is a choice. And so, therefore, if it's a choice, then what am I going to choose? Am I going to allow the news to upset me? Or am I going to allow what I know that I know, and that's my faith walk, to work for me? And that's how I would say live and not just be alive. So an individual is wanting to know that, understand yesterday's gone, tomorrow's not promised. All I have is today.
So it's to do the best you can in this present moment. And I like that reminder and point that you shared, that tomorrow is not tomorrow. Yesterday is already gone, and we can't change it. And we cannot and should not let the opinions of others deter us from being who we are capable of being. And a lot of times, I believe we sometimes allow the opinions of others to stop us from being our best self. And I think that's a great reminder, but also to realize that we cannot change yesterday. We don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. So our best option is to do the best that we can, love the people that we have around us in today, not tomorrow or in the future or yesterday, and work on being the best that we can be right now as we go forward. Take up, just live, I would say, in this moment, and not worry about what happened yesterday. So, and that's a great point, I believe, when it comes to living, to take advantage of today and don't worry about tomorrow or what happened yesterday. So my next question is, and this is before I ask my final question, where can the listeners find and support the work that you're doing?
Yes. So I'm on just two platforms that I've chosen to be on, and that's LinkedIn. And an individual can see there on LinkedIn, it's Cary Holman. I'm there on LinkedIn, but then also on Twitter.
Yeah.
On Twitter, huge, because here's what I've learned going back to the narrative. As a leader of a school, a large school, it is important that I don't allow someone else to tell our story. And so that's from going to different workshops and presenting at different conferences. I believe that we as leaders must tell the story. And so that's why I have embraced Twitter. And I can be found on Twitter at Mr. Opportunity CH. You can find me there once again on those two platforms.
Okay. Thank you. And I will definitely put it in the comment area where the individuals can learn more about what you're doing and the work that you have been doing, especially, serving the next generation of leaders, because they will be the next generation. So I'll definitely put it there where they can find and support what you're doing, and maybe learn from your years of experience, because some of what we need to know to serve others will not just come from the textbook, but it will come from someone who have the experience. Because the experience, a lot of times, you have seen first an example of what happened and what work and what don't work. So I'll definitely have your contact there so they can reach out and learn more about what you're doing. And my final question is, what impact do you want to have on the world?
That's a great question. The impact that I want to have on the world is for individuals to truly see the value of knowing who you are and whose you are. The reason I say that is I think about my journey through life, and one could say, as a young Black man, come from a single parented home, being raised in the housing projects, that I was deemed to be a statistic. Well, I look at it from that angle. Okay, count me as a statistic that made it.
Hmm.
One of those individuals that your yesterday does not have to define you, it yet catapults you to where you desire to go if you use it that way. And so, through my walk and my journey in education, through my commitment with my faith and my walk with the Lord, individuals have got to know that there are more good days than there are bad days. That it's all in a mindset of an individual to take the time to say, I'm going to count my blessings. I'm going to count my pluses. Yes, I'm going to look at my mishaps, But I know without a shadow of a doubt that I've had more good than I've had bad. And I share that with teachers. There are always more people doing right in the world than there are doing wrong. And so we've got to have a mindset that is so positive that we don't allow individuals. I used to have this expression in my classroom years ago when I taught, and it said, I will not allow any noun. And what is a noun? A noun is a person, place, thing, or idea. So I said, I will not allow any noun to disrupt the climate of my day. So no person, no thing, no idea could disrupt my climate. Do I have to agree with everything that's going on? Absolutely not. But I am in control of me, the individual. And I close with this example. At the very beginning of the year, I gave my teachers a blank sheet of paper, Dr. Cross, and I said, I want you to trace your hand on this paper. I said, on the inside of the handprint, I want you to write down the things that you as the individual control. And I set the example. I can control what I'm going to put on. I can control what gas pump I'm going to stop to fill up my vehicle. I'm going to control what meal I choose to eat. I said, now on the outside of the hand, I want you to write down all the things that you cannot control. I cannot control whether or not my teachers are going to come to school every day. I cannot control whether or not parents are going to come and be supportive or not be. So if I know that I can't control those things, then help me understand why I exert my energy to those things. Our focus has to be on the things that we can control. And that's changing the narrative. The narrative is you can't make me see life any differently. I'm positive, I'm energetic, and I'm happy. And there's nothing that you can do or say that's going to rob me of that. But an individual has to have that internal conviction to say that I choose to live and not just be alive.
Man, that is powerful. I really like the example of the blank sheet, and I was smiling a bit because normally when I go and do a presentation, not as you do, with drawing your hands and stuff like that, but something similar. I give my audience a blank sheet and write all the things that they have done up until this point, because my thing, I talk about change and how we can change our life. And we can't change this. So they write everything, the success, the bad, and then we turn the page. And then you decide what your life is going to be going forward. Similar to what you do is because it's about the things that you can control. Because once we take a hold of what we can control, we will live a more intentional life and we will realize more of our own ability. So I really love that analogy to control the things that we can control. As you said, and you're not going to be able to control the individuals who are supposed to support you. If they do, they do. But we have to, as you mentioned, do the things that we are in control of. And that's a great reminder when it comes to us making change.
Absolutely.
We have to do the things that we can do and don't worry about what others are not doing. And you share another point that I believe is really important. A lot of times we hear the negative as if there are more negative things happening in the world around us. They are more positive, but the focus then becomes on the negative. And if you focus on the negative, it's going to seem as if that's what's happening the most. We have to learn to focus on the good. And even if it's one good, depends on where you are, you're still focusing on the good because it helps to condition your mind or our minds when we focus on whatever we're focusing on. So if we want to see change, we have to focus on change. Dr. Holman, man, this has been a great conversation. Man, I'm glad that you take the opportunity to be here on the Black Male Impact. And again, man, I commend you on the work that you are doing in your community and with the students and the young people, because it's good for them to be molded early in their life and molded by someone who understands. Because it's not that you have the knowledge, but you too could have been a statistics. But I like what you say, you know what, I'm not going to be that statistic. I'm going to be this statistic. And that's great that individuals understand that they don't have to be the statistics that society think they're going to end up in. And so you're not only sharing knowledge. I just listening to you and just seeing the work that you have been doing. You're also sharing it from a place of understanding, because you too have to overcome your own hurdles earlier in life to achieve the success that you achieve. So again, Dr. Holman, man, I thank you for being here on the Black Male Impact.
Thank you, Dr. Cross, for having me. I greatly appreciate the opportunity. And it is my prayer that you continue doing what you're doing with the work on the Black Male Impact as well.
All right, man. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And I know the listeners appreciate it as well. Thanks, listeners, for tuning in to the Black Male Impact. Our goal is to share insights and perspectives that will help you to make a difference in your world.